We are live, and I'm so excited to be here. Oh, and my phone's off. With Julian, who is with ClipDocsTC. So we have been working with Julian for probably about 4 years now. And for those of you who don't know, a transaction coordinator is somebody, that's what we mean when we say TC, is somebody who helps real estate agents with their paperwork, managing timelines. So they are part of our team and they help us with all of that. And so I'm excited to have been working with Julian for the last 4 years, and his brother is also part of his team, and they are just really phenomenal and have helped our team out so much. Today, we wanted to talk about kind of some hiccups that can happen when you're in escrow, what to watch out for. And so we're excited to have him here. And then Deanna wanted to come in and say hello. Hello. So she's in here with me today too. So we'll go ahead and get started. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and then we'll get into kind of the meat of things.
Yeah, thank you so much for the intro, Jenica, and it's always a pleasure working with you and your team, especially with Deanna. So a little bit about me. I guess it's been a long time since we talked about this, Jenica, but I guess the first thing would be is I come from a hospitality service kind of background. I was actually wanted to become a professional chef. Went to culinary school, worked at Disney World, worked at UC Davis and as a chef, as a sous chef over there. And then from there, I decided to get my real estate license. And crazy to say, but I actually hated selling real estate. It wasn't my thing. I don't like driving. So that's one of the big things. And that was kind of my deal breaker, but you had to show a lot of homes to make sales, right? So I fell in love with real estate processes because I coordinated my first real estate deal, my own sale, and kind of fell in love with it from there. And it kind of turned into this whole thing where now I have a team, processes, automations, and stuff like that. But yeah, that's about me.
Awesome. And yes, that's one thing for other agents that might be watching that they do differently than other transaction coordinators that we found is they have so many things are automated, and Julian's even helped me with like cleaning up my email inbox or different ways that we can streamline things on the agent side of our business that have it's made it so helpful for me. So let's just tell people like what happens after you go into contract on a house.
Yeah, so when we go into a contract on a home, I like to use listings as a really good example because it kind of has more of the meat and potatoes of the entire transaction rather than a buyer. Because from when you get under contract, it's pretty much the same thing, right? So let's say we're working with the seller and Jenica sends us an accepted contract. Of course, we'll tell Jenica like, "Hey, congrats! Congrats on the successful negotiations." And from there, we just start data extraction. So we kind of use our own AI system to pull some of the details on the contract. Of course, it's never too accurate, so I'm still pulling information and gathering data on my own. So that's like contract dates, purchase price. Of course, we need to find out escrow information and any contact information that we're missing. Typically, it's if we're working with the buyer side, sometimes we haven't worked with the buyer up front yet. If we haven't received the buyer broker agreement, it'll be just the buyer contact information. If the contract is financed, of course, we're going to be looking for the loan officer contact information. So that's all part of the data extraction part, right? Because in order for us to be as accurate as possible and to get a timeline out, we need to make sure we have all of the correct information for the contract. And we're not just looking at the RPA. We try to go through the entire contract to see if maybe there's some other documents in there. Let's say like a seller in possession, if like the seller needs rent back, we make sure we go double check that's in there. We like to go to the MLS to see if it has solar or HOA. And we also note that in the timeline. And that way it makes it easy for escrow to get started on stuff. So a lot of things to double check. We still go into the MLS to check if maybe there are disclosures already, if we're working on the buyer side. Of course, if we're on the listing side, we'll already know if there are disclosures or not. And from there, once we have all that data, We make sure we double check everything. We send out the initial timeline to the real estate parties. And that's where, it depends on how we work with specific teams. For Jenica's team specifically, they also like to double check the timeline on their end, and then I get approval, and then we could send it to either the buyer or the seller from there. And that's kind of how we get started on the contracts. And from there, typically, the rest of my team, Gabe, also my brother, he'll hop in and kind of review the documents, see what needs to be uploaded to Jenica's or any agent's compliance system, and so that way we could make sure that everything's in compliance for the broker. But yeah, that's how we get started. I mean, there's a lot more to it, and a lot more that goes into it in between from contract to close.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's the other part of it too, is the transaction coordinators make sure that our paperwork is uploaded to our broker to make sure it's in compliance. And so that we can focus as agents, on the customer service piece and helping clients, and Julian and his team make sure everything else runs smoothly. So usually that timeline that he's talking about too is what you'll get as a client from us, or from them, I guess I should say, that goes over your whole timeline. So when you have an accepted offer, whether you're a buyer or seller, there's inspections, there's an appraisal, there's a loan contingency, there's a final walkthrough that happens. So those dates are all detailed out in that timeline. So that's, one timeline, one email to star or save somewhere so that you can reflect back on it as you're going through your transaction. Julian and Gabe help us to make sure we stay on top of those deadlines. So if you're a seller and you had an offer accepted on your house today, the buyer has 3 business days to get their earnest money deposit sent to the title company. So they have Thursday, Friday, and then Monday, right? So business days. So he's going to alert me and you, the seller, when that earnest money deposit's there. And if it's not, well, that's a problem. So that means the buyer is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then there's different action steps we can take if by Monday the deposit's not there. So as soon as we have that accepted offer, there's timelines that start ticking. And so our transaction coordinating team helps us to make sure we're staying on top of those timelines. So
right, exactly. And then to piggyback off of that, we're constantly sending reminders. And for Jenica, we actually do send text reminders as well. Jenica is on top of everything and wants to make sure that she's like in line. And so in order to do that, our team kind of helps out with that because she's busy helping clients, right? And making sales and negotiating, and having to remember all of the inspection and appraisal, and like when maybe a financing contingency is due can kind of be hard, right? And that's where we step in to help and make sure those reminders go out.
yes, absolutely. Can't have too many reminders. So let's move on and talk about where you've seen deals go wrong, would you say?
I would say most deals go wrong within the inspection period, and a lot of the time too within the appraisal as well. Those are mostly where things go wrong, and I think mostly because of deadlines. It's usually missed deadlines. Typically, inspections will either be late, or obviously something might go wrong in the inspections, right? And no matter how many reminders we could send, there are things that we can't control, right? So that's stuff with the property. Maybe the inspector doesn't have anything on their schedule, right? And then we could extend, of course, but that's kind of usually what happens. But there are other things like that in terms of the timelines, because though reminders go out, Jenica is amazing at this. She looks at all our texts and sees the reminders, but sometimes the agent on the other side will ignore those reminders, right? And things could go wrong there. And then that's where we would see if maybe you might need a notice to perform or a demand to close, stuff like that. It's normally because of bad communication when it comes to the timelines. And that's a huge part because most of the deal is just the timelines, right? Making sure we just hit those deadlines. But yeah, poor communication and not being able to control some of the stuff like the inspections.
That's so good. And that's we tell clients too, like when we're in a consultation, we're going to do our best to control the part of the, what we can, but there are some things that are out of our control, like inspector schedules, agents who aren't getting back to us. What I will say is just to clarify what Julian was saying about a notice to perform. So let's go back to the scenario about the deposit. So on that third day, if the buyer has not put their earnest money deposit into the title company, then we can issue what's called a notice to perform, which says, hey, Mr. Buyer, you had until Monday at 5 p.m. to put your deposit in, you didn't. And so you have 2 days to cure this, meaning put it in with title, or we as a seller, or you as a seller, as a client can cancel. And so that's one way to kind of force them to say, hey, are you in or out? And so, and there's also things, a lot of agents in the business, we move quickly. There's lots of check boxes. I mean, if you accidentally, have a checkbox off and you're making an offer on a house and it's contingent upon a house that you need to sell, that's a whole nother thing, so there's lots of details. And so with the transaction coordinator too, they can help to say, hey, did something get missed here, and help kind of be that extra set of eyes, because you can't wait an extra minute sometimes in this business, or you might lose a house. So we're moving quickly, but having an extra set of eyes with a good transaction coordinator can help to help with some of these problems that come up. But good communication is really important, because let's say we're on the buyer end and we needed a couple extra days. If we are open with the communication with the listing agent, they can usually get us a couple more days, versus we just don't respond, or like don't talk to them about it and just go past our deadline. With open communication, I feel like we can overcome a lot of things, because everybody wants, the same thing at the end of the day, to, help the transaction go forward and make it a win-win.
I agree. And then stuff like the missing checkboxes and maybe even missing documents can also kind of bring a deal down, especially if the type of financing, right? There are sometimes, if the property is FHA, being financed under FHA, there are more lender required documents for that. And of course, we're aware, right? And then your compliance team, Jenica's compliance team, will also let us know. Like, hey, this financing type requires this, or if it's VA, like a veterans loan, it'll need like specific inspections or repairs, or specific documents from the inspection company. And of course, we'll make sure we take care of those. But sometimes those could get overlooked as well throughout the deal, because sometimes some loan companies will, let us know last minute, like, hey, we need this document, right? And then we kind of have to get a rush to get it signed. And typically that's for FHA deals. But we make sure we take care of it, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Do you have any stories that you can share, or a story about a deal that went wrong or almost went wrong, and how you saved it?
Yeah, so a good example, actually, a good example will be a deal that we just closed. I just closed with another agent. We were coordinating, and it everyone wasn't communicating. Not a single, the agents weren't talking to each other. It was just really weird, and we couldn't figure it out. And so one thing I did is I was I decided to call the agent on the other side. I noticed they didn't have a transaction coordinator as well, and that might have been the reason. They're also self-brokered, and there's only so much they could do. Maybe they're busy, or just they really just can't get to their emails. So I called multiple times, 3 times in the span of like an hour, just to see if I could help. And then I kind of pitched it to them and say, like, hey, this deal is about to close in like 3 days. I would love to help. Um, we could talk about a transaction coordinator fee later, but I would love to help you get this transaction all sorted out. Because we've been asking for disclosures to be signed since every day for like a week. And the agent didn't get back to us. And she let me know, like, hey, she's been slammed, she's sick, she's taking care of her family and just trying to get through it. So I said, like, hey, just for this one transaction, we're going to do it. We're going to do it completely for free. We're going to knock this one out. She gave us her client's contact information. We got all the disclosures signed really quick within like the same hour of her hiring us. And we actually got them connected with the escrow company to see if they could help set up the signing, and going from there. And then we closed it. It just closed yesterday. So there's a lot of things that, of course, other TCs, but myself, we could help with, in terms of getting things moved forward. And like Jenica said, it's all just communication. If we all just communicate and really push through, we could do that. Actually, Jenica was one of the people, or is the agent that kind of convinced me, like, hey, you just pick up the phone and call and figure it out. Because sometimes I would wonder, like, oh, where's escrow information for a transaction? I can't find it, so I email. But instead, if I know maybe what company it is, I'll call the company and ask who the escrow officer is, right? Instead of just waiting. But sometimes communicating and picking up the phone and figuring it out from there, it could really help a deal close out. But yeah, that's a good example. I think a good example of one that I saved personally.
Yeah, that's awesome. And sometimes, like you said, well, I picked up and called them, and like, just for our clients out there, just so you know, like, so many agents only want to text. And so we're
Yeah.
also trying to communicate in the fashion that other agents want to be communicated with, or how they want to be communicated with. And so we're kind of sometimes in between that. But yes, sometimes picking up the phone to say, hey, and also, as everybody knows, you know, stuff gets lost in translation with text message and the tone. And so being able to just say, hey, how can I help? And building that rapport, because so much is done online, you don't see people anymore, so it's lost. And so I think having that, relationship aspect can really help build a bridge to then, move everything forward. So it sounds like you guys did that on there. So that's awesome. All right. So what do you feel like sellers should not overlook?
I think sellers shouldn't overlook their disclosures. Um, Jenica and her team are really amazing at getting disclosures up front, even trying to get them before the property gets on the market. And a lot of it, and it's no hate to any sellers, of course, right? But really, really answer the questions as best of your ability. I know sometimes it might be hard, and there might be things you might not know. Ask your agent, ask Jenica, say, hey, like, the shared fences is always missed on the disclosures, but it's really important to know that kind of stuff, right? Um, I've seen a lot of deals fall through. One reason is because they didn't have disclosures up front, right? And as soon as the buyer sees those disclosures, sometimes the deal could fall through. It's our goal to make sure we at least get the seller started on the disclosures, but definitely up to the seller to go ahead and fill them out as soon as possible, because the sooner the better. And that way, Jenica and her team can review the disclosures and kind of help make corrections where needed. And that way you could filter out potential bad buyers, right? The ones who don't actually want to buy the property because there's something on disclosures they found out later, right? So that's the biggest thing I would say. Of course, we want to, respect everyone's time when it comes to that kind of thing, right? So having the disclosures up front, answering them as best as you can, is really, really important, I would say. And of course, if we'll send reminders. A lot of the reminders for those are automated, and I know a lot of sellers might miss them because sometimes those emails go to spam. But just be aware that you do have to fill out those disclosures. It might not be required right away because they're technically not required until you enter into contract, but definitely will save your deal if you do it up front.
Yes. And something with those too. So when you sell a piece of property, you're required to answer a lot of questions about the property, anything you know about the property. But let's say we sell in a neighborhood where there's an airport close by a lot, and we sell a lot of homes in that neighborhood. So that's one of the things on the noise disclosure you have to disclose, even if people can see this is an airport or an aviation community on the thing in front of the community, you still have to disclose it. But let's say somebody isn't okay with that. We don't have disclosures up front, and then they get into contract on the house and then realize that that's a problem, right? And then your house goes pending, back to active. And anytime you see a house go pending and go back on the market, you wonder what's wrong with it, or most buyers do. So it is important to have them up front, and especially with things like that, where, like, for some people that's going to be an issue, some won't care, but better to know, up front, and then they could not buy the house if they don't want to, versus accepting an offer, then doing the disclosures. So super important. I would agree with that. All right. So what do you feel like the most common mistake that buyers make during escrow is?
Huh. I think one of the biggest mistakes right now, that's a tough one. I would say is I would say it's the same thing, right? Actually reviewing the disclosures, properly. A lot of the times I would see buyers, I would send the disclosures out to sign. And as soon as they view the document, maybe like 30 seconds later, it's all fully signed. And you kind of can tell like from there, like, okay, this wasn't properly reviewed, but it was signed. And it's totally up to the buyer, whether they care or whether they don't. But it's definitely important just to skim them as best as they can. And of course, Jenica will help answer questions about those disclosures as best of her ability as well. But it's definitely important. Another thing is we we don't expect buyers or sellers to be good at email, right? Because that our job is to be in the emails and Jenica's as well, right? However, we do send intros, right? And kind of introduce buyers to the escrow company, and making sure like as soon as we enter into contract, those emails are at least the intro emails are being read so that they have, or as a buyer, you have the escrow information and that you know that they're going to be reaching out to you for maybe wiring instructions or even setting up the closing signing, right? So that's really, really important. Buyers are a little bit more required to be replying to some stuff in email and having a lot more information, especially if it's a finance contract. There's a lot more emails that go through, and there's a lot more care that goes into it when you're a buyer.
And I was going to mention one thing with on the buyer side or the seller side, our job is to guide and protect you. And so with those disclosures, our commitment on our team is we're going to be doing those with you because it's very easy when you get a disclosure link. We see disclosures sometimes on houses we're showing and everything's checked no. The shared fences, the no, it's not in an HOA and it is. And these are all legally required documentation that if you disclose improperly, we could all be in court for non-disclosure, which is the number one reason that buyers sue sellers is for lack of disclosure. So even if you don't want to disclose that you live near an airport or, this repair that you did to your house because you're worried it's going to scare people off, you legally have to disclose it. And we can help you with the verbiage or, what to type out. And so that's what our commitment is to you as your seller's agent is to, make sure to guide you and protect you. And yes, you'll get lots of emails, but one of our other commitments is you won't get a DocuSign from us unless we've told you it's coming and you know what you're signing because you get so many emails. Everything can be done electronically with the exception of you signing with a notary. And so we know that it's overwhelming. So we try to do the best we can to guide you and, help you to know what you're signing so that you're not just signing what feels like your life away, in those DocuSigns. So
100%. Yeah, I think when you're working with Jenica and us, you are going to receive many, many DocuSign emails from us.
yes. Well, thank you. This has been so helpful. So where can, clients and or other agents find you if they want to learn more about your company?
Yeah, if you want to learn more, definitely you're free to give me a call and I'll let Jenica know if you're calling me. Just so you can learn what we do, what our responsibilities are. Or you could check us out at cliptc.com. So that's CLIPTC.com. If you're an agent, there's an onboarding link and we could set up a time to meet on Zoom and go over it. But definitely, if you're a buyer and seller and you're kind of curious and you kind of want to kind of gain our trust a little bit, you're always feel free to call me. I could explain everything and let you know what my responsibilities are separate from Jenica. And that way there's no confusion, stuff like that.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. It was wonderful and we'll be seeing you online.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Jenica. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.